Good evening. Welcome to a live draft podcast here at Everybody Hates Cleveland. This is EHC2. We'll call it the Andrew Wiggins edition. Mike Hattery has joined me once again. I'm, of course, your host, Jim Pete. We're both from everybodyhatescleveland.com. And for those of you that don't know about our website, make sure you check it out. It's www.everybodyhatescleveland.com. And if you're a Cleveland fan and you happen to be listening to this, pondering the name, it's irony, people. It's irony. Everybody doesn't hate Cleveland, but everybody does. Hit the About section. You can read all about it. We've got content up all during the week. Probably our biggest piece this week was a John Clayton piece written by our very own Steve Orbanek. We have lots of draft coverage as well. Cavs definitely taking the spotlight this week. With the draft tonight. And, of course, we now know our first-round pick. Before we get into the first-round pick and before we talk about that pick, let me pull in my cohort, my tag team partner, one Michael Hattery, who is relaxing and lounging in the balmy state of New York. Michael, how you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. Cavs got my boy. They did the right thing.
Well, a good segue, Mike, as we talk about your boy Andrew Wiggins, as he currently is a Cleveland Cavaliers player after much speculation over the past several weeks, where we went seemingly from Wiggins to Embiid to Parker and back to Wiggins again. The Cavaliers don't pull any punches today and draft the guy that I think most people in the Twitter sphere, most of the media experts, and many of our fellow podcasters and fellow writers at many of the other blogs thought they do. And they took Andrew Wiggins, a 6'8", 200-pound swing from Kansas. Many dubbed the next LeBron at the beginning of the year. Many believed would be the number one pick at the beginning of 2013. Mike, before we get into specifics about the pick, it seems like Wiggins was the guy all along. And while David Griffin came on air late after the pick and said there was a lot of debate about who to take as the week went on, what made people doubt Wiggins when he seemed like a surefire guy at the start of the college season? Why, after such a great season with Kansas, did people doubt him, and why did Parker enter the equation? Why did Embiid enter the equation? Was it more their talent, or were there true question marks about Wiggins that needed to be addressed?
I don't really think there were true question marks. I mean, I think there's the one great criticism. There are two criticisms. One of them is the classical timidity criticism. He doesn't take the game over criticism, which he's a hard worker. He's competitive. He doesn't have a really high usage rate. He hasn't yet. That doesn't mean he's not going to. He's not a ball hog. He doesn't dominate the ball. I don't have a huge issue with that yet. I think that you need more than a one-season sample to argue that a guy doesn't take over games, more than a single game. I mean, I think he in a close game against West Virginia, he put up 41 points. So to me, that's an unfair criticism. The other criticism that exists is that he's not a great shooter, and he's not. But he's solid, and I think the shooting criticism is pretty heavy for a guy whose true shooting percentage is about .56. He's a pretty effective shooter, especially on the interior. He's going to get better. Shooting is something that improves. You don't get his athleticism. You don't become a defender like him. You can't find them everywhere, and shooting gets better. It's a learnable trait, and his unlearnable traits are incredible, so you kind of let it go.
I think David Griffin said it best. A guy like Griffin is, to me, a guy who plays who will become a better shooter if he puts the effort in. And I guess that's the question. Will he be a guy who puts the effort in as we go? And I don't know that we've seen anything in his past that leads me to believe he wouldn't. I mean, Mike, we're talking about a guy who, listen, I mean, this is a guy who's come from an NBA background. I mean, his dad, Mitchell Wiggins, was an NBA player. And while he wasn't a star by any stretch, he went to Florida State. I believe his dad went to a couple of different major colleges. He ended up playing for 2 or 3 different NBA teams, but was a professional basketball player for 20 years. This seems to be a guy that runs in the family, high IQ, and his skill set is off the charts. Our boy Steve Urbanek loves his 7-foot wingspan. You're talking about a guy who's transitions well. You're looking at a guy who can touch the top of the backboard. You're talking about a guy who's an elite defender already. This is a guy who seems to have everything there is to it and is a good guy on top of that, high character player. Don't you think that high character players tend to be guys who work hard? I mean, we're not talking about Kyrie. And listen, I'm not ripping on Kyrie Irving here, but Kyrie Irving coming out of Duke, a lot was said about him. And it was only a 10-game sample size, but a lot was said about his ability to dribble way more than he should. I think that was the big knock on him coming out. And while nobody knew about him, I don't recall anybody talking about his character the way they talk about Wiggins' character. Doesn't Wiggins' character override all of this? Don't you think that he's a guy who just understands you have to work hard?
Yeah, I think I don't think I'm not in the locker room, and you don't want to rebuke any player, but I think visibly, to me, when a guy doesn't work hard on defense, and I see it in games, it really reflects to me the idea that I don't think he's a particularly hard worker. And the Cavaliers seem to have a lot of those guys who don't really work that hard on defense, and had one of the best defensive coaches in basketball. Though he wasn't a great head coach. Mike Brown is a great defensive head coach, and he made them competent defensively, which is incredible considering how lazy Kyrie is on defense. And at times Dion can be, although Dion really became a solid defender near the end of last year, and puts forth effort. But Wiggins is a guy that constantly puts forth effort. That's a valuable asset. He'll continue to get better. And if there's a guy whose jump shot you expect to get better, it's a guy who works hard. He works hard. He wants to be a stud. He is a stud. It's going to work out.
All right, so let's look at the Cavaliers now with Wiggins in the lineup, assuming that the Cavaliers are going to keep him. You look at the roster. Of course, we've got Dion Waiters, Kyrie Irving, as mentioned before. You have Tristan Thompson, Anthony Bennett. Not sure what the center position looks like right now, past Anderson Varejao, Spencer Haas, a guy that they likely won't re-sign. Does Wiggins immediately start? Is this a guy that David Blatt looks to start right out of the gate with the number 1 pick? Unlike Anthony Bennett last year, who was injured and then came in a little overweight and lacking perhaps that effort. Is Wiggins a guy that's going to step into this lineup as constructed? Is this guy a starter right now? Or are the Cavs going to find another guy to get put in front of him to perhaps slow work him into this offense and defense?
I'm thankful that you throw me nice and generous questions, but I think that the obvious answer that we both know is yes. I mean, he's a great defensive player, really solid. The Cavs need that. He's very different than Bennett in that he's a solid defensive player. He's going to be in shape day one. And really, it doesn't hurt the Cavaliers to have a guy who's a really solid defender, can get out and run on the break, really athletic on the break, who won't dominate the ball in his first season when they have 2 ball-dominant guards with Kyrie and Dion. I mean, ultimately, I don't know if you could have a better fit in terms of the skill set he brings and the things that he needs to improve on. So I do think he plays day one. I think he plays 30 minutes a game, and I think he's really valuable. And while I think Jabari Parker probably wins Rookie of the Year award just because of the finished product that he is, I think Andrew Wiggins has a really solid first year, which starts, a really incredible pro career.
All right, so I know a lot of people have been talking comps here with Wiggins. I want to throw a guy out to you, perhaps that hasn't been talked about a lot with regards to Andrew Wiggins. This is a guy who I think I think bears a lot of similarities, hopefully in a lot of different ways. This is a guy who came in, I think, as a defensive specialist when this team drafted him, and that's Indiana's Paul George. This is a guy, I think, that has developed into quite the all-around player, a 6'9" wing, a very good defensive ball player, kind of slight when they drafted him, was a 10th overall pick by Indiana. But I think certainly when in hindsight, certainly could have been drafted higher with his ability now. But you see similarities in the two. Obviously, I think Wiggins probably has more upside. But might his floor be a guy like Paul George, who started off as a defensive guy and has turned into quite the offensive ball player?
Well, I mean, Paul George is one of the 15 best NBA players right now. So, I mean, if that's his floor, I love it. I think he could be Paul George, and I think if he has a Paul George career, I'll be happy. But I think he could be a little better than Paul George. If you look at their shooting stats, Wiggins was better in college. He's an equal athlete. He's an equal defender. Maybe not quite the defender that Paul George is, but very close. Very young. I mean, I think that's a really solid comp, and I think that's what he could be at this level. Although maybe a tick smaller, but I mean, yeah, I like it.
So, the thing about George was patience. A lot of people say that Wiggins is 2 or 3 years away from being the player he's ultimately going to be. That seems to fit the mold of George, who didn't really get his opportunity until I believe it was Danny Granger who got injured, allowing George to kind of roam free. There isn't anybody in front of him in Cleveland right now as it stands, although there's certainly going to be speculation over the next few days about LeBron James and with all this Kevin Love rumors going, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But without anybody in front of him, will it help him or hinder him? And in this way, Mike, we already talked about him probably starting for this current rendition of the Cavs. Will that hurt him because he doesn't have anybody to learn from, especially with a guy like Kyrie Irving being the quote-unquote leader of this team? Or will a guy like David Blatt, who seemingly has a good understanding of the game, we talked about him in EHC1 a few days ago, might David Blatt have a higher level of thinking with regards to a guy like Wiggins, and might he be the right coach to slowly mentor him along the way? And might we see maybe a reach to Paul George before that 3-year mark that everybody seems to be clamoring for?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be an issue. I'm concerned about guys who don't have someone in front of them to challenge them, when there are people who have shown the ability to be content with where they are, that don't challenge themselves. And Wiggins, on draft night, you saw a guy who said, I wanted to be the number one overall pick. That's been my goal since I was a young, and he earned his way there. So for a guy who's not content, who constantly challenges himself with a good head coach, I don't have a huge concern about someone not being in his way. If it was someone else, I would have that concern, but not with Andrew Wiggins.
All right, so this is a great pick for the Cavs. I mean, they get the guy they want. This is a guy that ultimately fits the team. Let's talk front office here. Let's talk about kind of the we've heard a lot of rumors over the past few weeks. I think Embiid was the guy that Wednesday when he came in a week ago. Clearly he injured his foot while there. You've heard speculation about whether or not he really was the guy. I kind of find it hard to believe that the Cavs didn't note that his foot was broken at the time. But then we kind of shifted back to Parker. Parker, of course, the elite offensive player. I actually believe Parker's probably a lot higher than people say kind of going forward. I think if he can chisel out a little bit, he could be a good player. But we heard David Griffin today talk about fast twitch muscles, and I think that's the difference between a guy like Parker and a guy like Andrew Wiggins. And when you think about these fast twitch muscles, the first thing that pops into my head when it comes to Wiggins is I heard Jay Billis talk the other day about his second jump ability, which really was intriguing to me. If you watched Kansas last year, Mike, and I'm not sure how many games you got to see of them, I did note after Jay Billis said that, I cannot tell you how many times I would see Andrew Wiggins take the ball to the hoop and end up missing a layup, fall under the basket, and immediately be on the court and jumping up above the rim, getting the rebound. The second jump ability, this fast twitch ability that they talk about, this really is an elite skill, isn't it? There aren't a lot of players who can change direction in the way that Wiggins can, who can plow to the basket the way that Wiggins can, especially if he gains some size. And the second jump ability, especially under the basket, while he doesn't have size right now, this could make him a difference maker, maybe even on the glass a little bit, don't you think? This fast switch ability, Mike, what do you think about it? I mean, it's an elite skill. There aren't many NBA players that have it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for a guy who's going to be playing between 2 and 3 for most of his career, I think he's going to out-rebound expectations for those positions consistently. I love second twitch guys, second hop guys, because it not only means they're just absolutely freak athletes, but they're freak competitors. In a league where we see guys who don't follow shots, who give up on boards consistently, guys who the second leap ability That's a freak athlete, and it's a freak competitor, and that's what I love about Wiggins. He's got both, and that's why he's going to become a better shooter. That's why he's going to become a really great all-around player.
Well, we shall see. Of course, this is early on. We don't know what the makeup of the Cavaliers are going to be. We still have a lot to talk about, and I suppose, Mike, we probably will be on hopefully with some more of our EHC cohorts as we move into this weekend, as we head towards the July 1st deadline for the Miami Heat players to opt out. There's been a lot of speculation. Chris Broussard noted on ESPN tonight that Kevin Love has told his inner circle that if the Cavaliers can bring aboard LeBron James, that he would definitely sign a long-term deal with the Cavaliers. Obviously, the Cavaliers would have to move some assets to acquire Love. The Cavaliers certainly have those assets right now. I would have to believe that if the Timberwolves are going to deal Kevin Love, that they'd immediately be talking about Wiggins, if not Kyrie Irving. Do you see a scenario where the Cavaliers could have drafted Andrew Wiggins, noting that he was an asset that there are some other teams out there that might want, or could you see a scenario even where Kyrie Irving is dealt, but might Kevin Love be a guy that the Cavs target in the next couple of days, as well as LeBron James? I mean, what are the realities of this happening? Most people think that the Miami Heat are the locks for LeBron James. You and I were talking off air, and I know it's sensible to say LeBron James isn't coming to the Cavaliers, but there has got to be more to LeBron James opting out of his contract prior to this draft without his cohorts, Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, who by all indications have been in on this with LeBron for several years, and who LeBron himself said he wouldn't make a decision without, and then he went ahead and made a decision without him. There's got to be something to all this, Mike, and whether or not it's LeBron actually leaving Miami or just feeling the process out to see what teams will do if he opts out without the other two, could there still be a move in the making for the Cavs? Might LeBron James still be out there? We've been throwing percentages around at EHC for the past few days. I don't want to throw percentages around tonight, but with this Love news coming out, I suppose the speculation is going to be rampant until LeBron James makes his mind up, right? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I've become pretty convinced just with irritating national leaks and David Blatt saying he didn't expect him here. But the more you look at the situation, the more confounding it becomes, because the LeBron, Bosh, and Wade trio is one that had acted with just rhythmic consensus the whole time they were in Miami. The shift to Miami was brilliantly planned, laid out, and them not opting out of those deals at the same time as LeBron is legitimate signaling. Now, LeBron may go back to Miami, but I think the certainty, the high odds on LeBron going back are just people who I don't know what they are, but I don't trust them. I think 30%.
Well, and most of those people, Mike, were the same people that were saying he would never. If you remember, Broussard. Yeah, 30. Well, if you remember, Chris Broussard himself was the guy that said LeBron James isn't going to leave Cleveland, if you remember way back when. I think that speculation right now is ridiculous. I think LeBron James has it in his mind what he's going to do, and I truly believe that Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh are no longer part of that process. But we shall see. I mean, maybe they were just ploying this around. Maybe we'll see moves in the next 3 or 4 days. I don't know. It's fun to talk about. Of course, so much speculation made about what the Cavs are going to do with number one, and they ended up doing what everybody thought. So perhaps we see our current Cavaliers team as we speak, but I know it's going to be a fun 5, 6, 7, 8 days. Please make sure you check it out. We certainly will have coverage of this draft going forward. There's a lot of draft. We got some draft coverage up today. We got 3 pieces up, including the Andrew Wiggins piece. I'll have a little bit of coverage on their number 2 pick. Mike has the piece going up tomorrow. Mike, you have an Indians piece going up tomorrow. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, ostensibly it's me picking on one of the most protected people in Cleveland, which is Terry Francona. And I really like Francona, but there are a few issues that I've had that I think are worth discussing going forward.
You are going to make Hiram Boyd the happiest man on the planet. Hiram, I know
Fantastic.
you're going to listen to this, man. There's your shout out. EHC is coming around your line of thinking, I guess. So tune in tomorrow for Michael Hattery's piece, and if you haven't seen, Michael's been posting at EHC. His first trend spotting went up earlier this week. I've got stuff up almost every day. My new column will start kicking in next week, and we'll have new content every day. Those of you who like pro wrestling, if you're listening, check out the site. We got some of that stuff up as well. And, of course, you know that any site that I'm a part of is going to have lots of Cleveland Indians content. While we haven't kicked into that yet, you can see with Mike's piece tomorrow and me going forward, we're going to hit a lot on the Cleveland Indians, who have yet to play. We still have Cleveland Indians to talk about tonight, along with his second pick. And who knows what else is going to go on tonight and tomorrow and in the next few days. So with that said, check out everybodyhatescleveland.com. And, of course, this podcast, we just found out today we got okayed for iTunes account. Once this podcast goes up, I'll be attaching it to iTunes, and we'll be getting all that information out to you this weekend, along with some other podcasts. I'm going to be trying to pull in some guests here. You have 5 or 6 guys at EHC that you haven't met yet, including Steve Orbanek. We also are going to try to pull in some guests from other sites. It's my goal to get, if you haven't seen a guy that writes at IndiansBaseballInsider.com who does their IBI on site, Hayden Grove, I'm gonna try to peer pressure him with this podcast to try to get him on over the weekend. We're going to try to pull in some other guys from other sites who we have good relationships with as well to try to give you kind of a varied look, especially with this draft and with the Cavs kind of shaping up their team over the next few days and few weeks and few months. New coach, Tyrone Lue, and of course we got lots of guys who look like they're going to get dealt, and the Cavs could be a fit, so this could be a lot of fun. So with that said, I'm trying to keep this as short as possible. Tune in to everybodyhatescleveland.com and look for all the information on these podcasts so you can watch live, listen live, and, of course, subscribe to us on iTunes going forward. Don't forget to check us out on www.soundcloud.com/everybodyhatescleveland. That's where all of our actual feeds will be going forward. Michael, any last thoughts before we wrap things up? We got a Syracuse boy who just got picked. We know that's up in your neck of the woods, at least in the near vicinity. This is your favorite pick of the draft, right?
I like Ennis a lot. I think he's a really solid pro, but it's not. Andrew Wiggins is my favorite pick of the draft.
So explain to me this as we close this up. I believe Gary Harris hasn't been picked yet, and we were talking earlier, like 13 or 14, about how he hadn't been picked yet. I really thought he was a sleeper. How is this guy not picked, and how good is Rod Hood going to be? Me and you were talking about him earlier this week. I really like him. I think there's a sleeper in Rod Hood. Someone's going to get a steal, don't you think?
I think Rod Hood or Gary Harris. I think if I'm the Cavaliers and I could trade up, and I know you should probably cut this from the podcast, but if you could get up to 2021 with these sort of slides, I'd do it. You have a lot of teams looking to move picks right now for salary reasons. I'd get up there. I don't think it's going to cost you a lot, and that's a really solid player at 20. Rod Hood or Gary Harris? Kidding me?
Yeah, I guess my question with the Cavs, because I've been expecting them to slide up here with every pick, is there a bigger plan in place? I mean, how smart is David Griffin in this front office? And that's more of a rhetorical question, Mike, because I think you and I both think they're pretty smart. I'm liking the direction of this front office, and I'm pretty excited to see what the Cavaliers do. I have a lot of faith and a lot of trust in what they've done, just based on what they've done in the past few months. We shall see. Is there a possibility they could keep any of their current potential free agents?
I like Haas. Like to see him keep Haas. I think it's a possibility. I don't think Dang's a possibility. I don't think he liked it there, and I don't think it makes sense with Wiggins because there's a little overlap. But I like Haas. I think you try and keep him around. I think it's a possibility.
And I guess one last piece. Back to the LeBron thing. I know this is kind of herky-jerky here at the end, but might Andrew Wiggins be a draw for LeBron James? I mean, I think one of his big issues with Miami this year was his lack of support. Might a guy like Andrew Wiggins being on this roster mean that LeBron James could see more bench time, stay fresh for the playoffs? And with a young team like the Cavaliers, might he be a tour de force in the playoffs?
Yeah, so My deal is, can anybody offer Minnesota better than Deion Waiters, Tristan Thompson, Memphis #1 protected, Miami #1 protected, next year's #1? No. You have Kyrie, you have Andrew Wiggins, you have Kevin Love. Tell me LeBron's not coming to Cleveland. Tell me that's not the best cast he could get and stay under cap. Come on.
Tell me, why is it that the Chicago Bulls had to be the team that gets Gary Harris? Why? Drives me flipping nuts. That's why everybody hates Cleveland. All right, guys, we're wrapping things up. Tune in a lot, because we're going to be on a lot. I think if we can keep these things to 20 to 30 minutes, we can do lots and lots of these. Listen, throw us some comments on Twitter. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter at EVRYHatesCleve. Not .com, just Everybody Hates Cleveland. Just type in Everybody Hates Cleveland into the search. We'll pop up. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter there. Of course, you can hit my Twitter. It's at JimPeteEHC, and you can hit Hattery, Hatman over here, at HatmanEHC as well. We look forward to talking to you. You have any ideas for podcasts you want to hear us talk about, shoot it to us, and we'll blather on and on about it as we tend to do. Thanks a lot for listening live, all 0 of you. Thanks a lot for listening, for those of you who listen later. We're out, and we'll see you soon.